Well, hello then. Today's video we are reviewing Argyle. Stick around and find out what we think about it.
So Argyle is one of the new movies brought out by Apple TV that went straight to cinema. So we've had a few other Apple TV movies that have done this and some that didn't. So this is one that made the list. I assume it's only because of the amount of stars that are in this film. So summarising Argyle, it's a spy action thriller comedy that came out this year in 2024. It followed Ellie Conway, who was played by Bryce Dallas Howard, and she is a novelist who is then targeted by a spy organisation called The Division because her books are starting to come a little bit too close to the truth, and they think that they can use her predictive powers to help them with their evil agenda. In this, she meets up with a real spy called Aidan Wilde, who was played by Sam Rockwell. What would we know Sam Rockwell from?
Iron Man 2?
Yeah, so he's like Tony Stark's like nemesis, or like the competing person business-wise?
Yes.
Yeah, I recognise him. When I started seeing the movie, I was like, I know this guy, but where from? I had to look it up afterwards. It's a funny movie in this, so it follows that, and it goes through Ellie's kind of pictures in her mind of her imagining the novel she's writing, and in that the spy Argyle is played by
Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill, famous from
Superman and the Witcher series.
Yeah, and then we also get to briefly see John Cena playing his partner in crime. Any more than this, it really brings a lot of spoilers into this film. It does have a lot of twists, and any more than that, and it really just ruins the movie experience. So that's the summary of it. Anything you want to add, Jacob, that I missed?
It is also directed by Michael Vaughan, who is famous from the Kingsman movies.
Yes, that is correct. And then I believe written in partnership with Jason Fuchs, that I wasn't aware of, but then I looked it up. He had quite an extensive list. So this movie is very Kingsman-esque, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah, and then they find a way to kind of link it to at the end, or at least reference it, which is kind of nice. Let's move into the scoring. We've got a new scoring system. So we kind of changed this because we thought our scoring system had a few things that repeated itself, or we had a lot of scores that continually started to fall similar to each other. And we thought, well, wow, how do we put more emphasis on our scores and give something that reflects more of what we felt the movie represented? So this is our new scoring system. So Jacob, what did you give the plot of this film out of 10?
For me, it gets a 4, and unfortunately it was really unique and different at the beginning, but unfortunately the writing direction, it uses too many twists, and from that point it became redundant, and then you kind of get sick of the twist, so unfortunately that gets very repetitive. And the twists, I think the writers think the twists, you're not going to get them, but unfortunately I got all of them except for one, and then you kind of go, well, this is what the movie wants you to think are amazing, and then they're kind of not, so that kind of ruined the plot, and that's kind of the main thing that got me frustrated with it. But it did have something unique and interesting with a writer's perspective of a spy story.
So I actually gave the plot an 8. I thought that it was fairly different, it was creative, it had a lot of potential. A lot of other parts of the movie kind of ruined it in terms of its production and the way it was put together, but I liked the whole premise of it, so that's why I'm scoring the plot an 8 out of 10, but I do have problems with it, and I do think the twists were just a bit too many, and it had some silly scenes, but overall the bones of what this film was about, I actually think was really, really good, so I gave it an 8. Moving on to about the acting and casting.
For me, this is what the movie excelled in. It got an 8. Sam Rockwell stand out in this performance. He led the cast. He did such a fantastic job, and everyone else did as well, but for me, he stealed the movie. And if I were to watch this movie again, it would be for his performance, his acting, and his character's performance. I want to see him in more roles. He nailed this performance. Everyone else did as well, but he stole the movie for me.
I also gave it an 8. I agree. I think Sam Rockwell stole the show. At first, I thought as I was watching it, this is an interesting casting. Both him and Bryce Dallas Howard are not the most convincing of action heroes, and their age doesn't quite reflect what some of the things are they have to do in this film. But as a pairing, they work, and I thought that was good. So I think they did good performances with what they had. So the script's a bit of a funny one, and some of the scenes are funny, but I'm not going to discredit the actors when they can only work with what they got. So I gave it an 8. Action as a title of it. But what do you think about that? What did you give that out of 10?
Unfortunately, this gets a 5. I think if you're used to the director's movies, you'll enjoy this, but for everyone else, it felt run-in-the-mill sort of movie with the quality, but it is a very fun movie. But when it comes to wanting more, it felt very easy and simple, but sometimes you need something like that. But for me, it's very in the middle. It doesn't do anything amazing, but when you're thinking quality and critically, it needs to do better.
Yeah, I think the way it was put together, the way they tried to disguise the twist or try and get you not to pick, I think that could have been done better, because they were quite easy to pick, or maybe they had a slightly too many. I think maybe they could have reduced one or two of the twists down, and that's what hurt it. So I gave it a 4 for that, opposed to Jacob's 5. So I think the way it was put together, the pacing was a bit off. It had some really odd scenes. The things they decide to make bigger and badder with songs, action, there's a dance scene in there. The choices of that, I thought, really made the movie go from, it took away any seriousness it had and made it almost laughable, which I think hurt. I think with the right kind of directing, we probably could have kept it slightly a bit more serious. Even though it is a comedy, it would have worked. I don't mind when a film, for instance this, she's imagining the book and then you're seeing the scenes play out. I think that's kind of cool. But when they start to merge it, there's times where she looks in the mirror and she sees Henry Cavill's character, or she's imagining someone else as Henry Cavill. Yes, through the twists and turns it makes a bit more sense, but when you look back at it, it didn't make the movie better. I think,
no.
If anything, it kind of hurt the twists. I think probably toned back on that. So again, good bones, but kind of just directed a bit incorrectly. Like, not saying I could do a better job, but I just felt that there was probably a few tweaks that could have been changed. What about the production? So we're talking the visuals, the sound.
For me, this gets a 4. The scene that in the production quality that really lost it there's one particular scene that really lost it for me. When you eventually watch it, you'll know it. That scene just is completely unrealistic and wouldn't happen, and for me, that action scene was completely unrealistic, so that lost the production, and that's why it gets the score. And just the choices of visuals and quality like that, it didn't work. But for a fun movie, you can get away for that. But when you're thinking critically, it does not work. So that's why it gets 4.
Yeah, I gave the production a 5. Fight scenes and the action probably let it down. You did have a cast of people that weren't convincing as heroes, and that kind of hurt it. There wasn't that much action if you really think about it. Besides the soundtrack played during this fight scene that Jacob's talking about, I didn't take much attention to the sound. It kind of just blurred in with the movie, which I guess is sometimes the intention, but even the choice of song then was a bit odd. Yeah, just the journey this movie took me on in the way that they chose to produce it and put it all together was a bit odd. So yeah, I gave it a 5 for that. What about the audience appeal? So this, we're talking about more about who was this movie made for, and spy, action, comedy, thriller is kind of the tags this movie gets. For its audience, did it nail it? Would someone that likes spy movies be happy? Someone that was looking for a laugh be happy? What's it get?
I say as a comedy movie, it gets a 7. It nails its genre. But for an action spy movie, it does not. And that's why it gets deducted 3 points, because I was the spy stuff does not work. It just doesn't work as a spy movie, but as a comedy, I really enjoyed it. It's a really good aspect of the movie, so I think I would recommend I think it would definitely appeal for comedy people, but it doesn't nail the action and spy stuff. It's hard to nail everything, so that's why.
I went into this movie blind. I didn't know what it was about. I hadn't seen any trailers, so I didn't know what... when it was being funny in the beginning, I didn't know if it was meant to be funny, and then when it was showing action, I didn't know if it was meant to be an action. Now, looking back on it, I actually think it kind of did nail the genre it was meant to be. I gave it an 8 out of 10. It's not perfect, but for a kind of a silly, action-y comedy, I think it did do that. The people in the cinemas were laughing. The demographic of people were interesting. I found it was quite a slightly older audience. And the biggest laughs were when the cat was on the screen. People in the cinema seemed to just be losing their shit over this cat. So I must say, crowd reaction, it was nailing it for the audience that went there. I, as a neutral party, I didn't mind it, and I probably would watch it again. So I think it did match it, but with such a broad range of action and comedy, you chuck in a few laughs and a few bangs and you kind of do nail that genre. It's kind of like a cheap, easy one to go for. So this is our last score. Originality/creativity. We understand not everything can be original. Eventually you start to repeat ideas.
I would say this movie is definitely creative with adding in twists, but when it comes to originality, it definitely is creative when adding in a lot of genres. But for me, this is why it gets a 6, is because by the time we got to the last twist, I was sick of how many twists it got. So I think it relied too much on the twist, and that's why. If they did the better job on the twist, I think it would have worked a lot better. But unfortunately, I think the creativity should have worked on better things within the movie, but I think it definitely nailed what they were going for with the comedy and spy and jumbling everything together, but it didn't do 100% what it was going for.
I gave it a 6.5. I actually think it was fairly original. Forgive me if I'm wrong, I can't think of a movie that's done the exact same premise, so to me it was original concept. It did have a lot of creative parts in it, but I think it got a bit too creative. I think, like what Jacob said, maybe 1 or 2 more twists. Again, we're not going to talk about the twist. We don't want to spoil this movie, but I think the first twist was an eye-opener, and I think that was great. I think kind of everything beyond that was like, wow, why are you sending us on this journey? The first one was enough. So it was, the creativity kind of hurt in the end. So 6.5. So, all scores totaled, what percentage did you give this as a score out of 100?
With our new scoring system, it got a 57%, and that might seem a little bit harsh, but that's what it got. I would definitely recommend seeing this movie, though, at the cinemas. That's the thing. If you like action comedy movies, yes, but for everyone, I would probably wait to stream it on Apple TV. I enjoyed my time. There are little things that I question, but I still enjoyed it. And if you see it, comment down below. Be looking forward to hear your thoughts about it.
So, my score ended up being a 66%, which we got to... With the new scoring, we're going to get some fluctuated scores, which is nice. We did get the feedback that our scores are a bit too similar from time to time, and that's purely coincidental. We actually have a really big difference taste in things, but we somehow get similar scores. But I got a 66. I think that truly reflects what this movie was. A genre that's generally not going to score too well, and it did okay for its genre. Just a bit of a mixed bag of movie. Bit off with the production, bit too many twists. And truly, the casting was...
the best part.
Well, it was, but it's funny, the biggest superstars in the movie had the smallest of roles. So it's funny in that way. And when we actually looked up this movie, apparently, originally, when it was pitched, it wasn't quite the same. It talked more about Henry Cavill being the main character, which is truly not the case in this film. He is not the main character. So, yeah, I think 66 is a fair representation of where I think this movie sits.
Well, like and subscribe, share the video. As always, you're awesome and keep being awesome, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.